And now for our next news special report.
Is the First Amendment under siege? Well, Justice Alito's fiery dissent in a shocking Supreme Court ruling has sent shockwaves through the nation. But that is just the beginning. The Lone Star State is gearing up for an unprecedented showdown with big tech giants. So what's really happening behind the scenes, and how will it affect your rights in 2024? Stay tuned for my final thought. It's a wake-up call you cannot afford to miss. Now, just as Justice Alito warns of threats to our First Amendment rights, Next News Network faces its own battle against censorship. For over a decade, we have been your beacon of truth, but now we're fighting for survival. Demonetized by YouTube and shunned by alternative platforms, we're experiencing firsthand the suppression Alito describes. As Texas takes on big tech, we are taking on the challenge of keeping you informed, but we cannot do it alone. Your support is crucial in this fight for free speech. The links below offer a way to stand with us, ensuring your voice, our voice, continues to be heard. Donate, pray, or share our message. Every action counts in preserving our constitutional rights. Now, in a stunning rebuke, Justice Samuel Alito has sounded the alarm in what he calls a blatantly unconstitutional decision by the Supreme Court. The High Court's 6-3 ruling in Murphy v. Missouri has effectively given the Biden administration a green light to continue its censorship campaign on social media platforms. Alito's blistering dissent accuses the majority of shirking its duty to protect free speech. He warns that this decision permits the successful campaign of coercion in this case to stand as an attractive model for future officials who want to control what people hear and what they think. Watch Jonathan Turley explain.
If the states don't have standing, who does?
Well, it's very frustrating for the free speech community because standing is often used to block meritorious claims. This is one of the most fundamental issues that we are facing. I wrote about this issue, this case, in my recent book because you have one of the largest censorship systems in our history, if not the largest. It's been called Orwellian by lower court judges. And what the court is saying is that we won't hear you on this issue because you're not the right litigants. Now, I have to admit, I've always been something of a standing dove. I believe that these standing decisions are too narrow because they do prevent the court from rendering a decision on such important constitutional questions. So this issue will have to wait for another day. But one of the things that many of us have been arguing for years is that the government is engaging in censorship by surrogate. I testified about this in Congress, that they have made a mockery of the limits of the First Amendment by doing indirectly what they're barred from doing directly.
So as Turley explains, this ruling has far-reaching implications for our First Amendment rights. The government's ability to pressure social media companies into censorship, in Turley's own words, censorship by surrogate. But while the Supreme Court may have faltered in its duty to protect our constitutional right, the great state of Texas is stepping up to the plate. In a historic move, the Texas Senate Committee on State Affairs has unanimously voted to authorize subpoenas to big tech firms like Facebook and Google. Now, this decision comes on the heels of explosive testimony from Google whistleblower Zach Voorhees. His revelation about Google's alleged bias and censorship practices have sent shockwaves through the halls of power in Austin. Watch.
Let's talk about news ranking. News sites that supported Democrats were ranked with the highest quality and trustworthiness. Here's a partial list. Wall Street Journal, 8.53. CBS News, 6.57. CNN, 6.0. Fox News, 5.2. Russia Today, 4.57. The Young Turks, 2.53. Alex Jones Network, negative 1.56. At the bottom of the list is Next News Network at negative 3.35. Let me reiterate, the foreign propaganda outlet Russia Today was scored 7 points higher than the Next News Network, one of the top YouTube news networks in America. Since my disclosure, Next News Network has been permanently demonetized and will soon be bankrupted. These sound more like the actions we'd expect from a Russian propaganda complex. But shockingly, it's the actions of Google.
Now, Voorhees' testimony paints a disturbing picture of how Google allegedly manipulates its search rankings to favor certain political viewpoints. Even more alarming, he claims that our own Next News Network right here has been unfairly targeted, and of course, we've been demonetized. But the story doesn't end there. Dr. Robert Epstein, a renowned researcher, has uncovered what appears to be a coordinated effort to influence voter behavior through targeted reminders. Listen to this.
The research basis for this, because people can debate, the bias being sent to liberals, moderates, and conservatives. But when you see a data point where Google is sending register to vote reminders to one party at 2.5 times greater than the other party, that statistically is way past 1 sigma. And that is obviously a clear point of bias. If you would elaborate. Anybody else can add to this? I'm curious on this. I just want to know what the statistical basis for it is.
Let me just go back a little bit in time, first of all, to 2022, because in 2022, we had several thousand field agents located mainly in just a few swing states. And in Florida, which was one of them, all day long on election day, Democrats were getting go vote reminders on Google's homepage, which is seen 500 million times a day just in the United States. Only 59% of Republicans were getting go vote reminders on that day. That is a blatant and extremely, extremely powerful vote manipulation. So what we're doing now, what we're seeing nationwide is this 2.5 times as many registered to vote reminders going to Democrats than to Republicans. Now think ahead a little bit. That's going to turn into partisan mail in your ballot reminders. And then that's going to turn into partisan go vote reminders. The net impact of those 3 manipulations is staggering.
No, I agree with, because I just want to understand. So there was a clear bias that you saw on GOTV, okay, which is notices going to one party at a much higher rate than the other in Florida. And again, I'm just trying to get a statistical basis where that sample of 2.5 is it in the states you're monitoring? Is it in Florida? Is it in Texas?
Because we're getting data 24 hours a day now from the computers of a politically balanced group of more than 14,500 registered voters in all 50 states. And that's where we're getting those data from. We're getting a tremendous amount of data from those people 24 hours a day.
And how long has this 2.5 times the rate trend been going for?
That started at roughly beginning of January. It was a trickle at first, and that's gotten larger now. And at some point, it's going to shift over, and we're going to start to see partisan mail-in-your-ballot reminders.
Well, yeah, because you have 3 steps. You have a registration step, and then you have an absentee ballot step, and then you have a go vote step. And you're expecting that shifts to occur, right?
Well, we know this from published data published by Facebook with some of my colleagues at the University of California, San Diego. We know that in 2010, Facebook sent go vote reminders on election day in 2010, the midterm, to 60 million of its users. And they calculated very cleverly that caused 340,000 more people to vote that day who otherwise would have stayed home on their sofas. So we know exactly what the impact is going to be of these reminders, and so does Google.
And Mr. Chairman, I would just say that if you have a sample group of 14,500 nationwide, that is a substantial group, and a 2.5 times rate is way past 1 sigma. I'll do the math here in a little bit, but it shows, very significant and methodical bias, actually.
Dr. Epstein's research suggests that Democrats are receiving 2.5 times more voting reminders than Republicans. This disparity could have a significant impact on the upcoming 2024 election. As Benjamin Franklin once said, whoever would overthrow the liberty of a nation must begin by subduing the freeness of speech. It seems that both the federal government and big tech companies are taking this advice to heart, but not in the way our founding fathers intended. In response to these threats to our republic, Zach Voorhees has called for decisive action. Watch.
What recommendations would you have for this legislature to take action to address the issues you address?
My recommendation is subpoenas would be filed against Google for any documents that have the name blacklist.txt related to Google, YouTube, and their news search corpuses. I would also ask that you subpoena their documents related to rankings of media outlets. I've provided a supplemental showing a slide deck including such a list. That is 4 years old. It's a bit dated. The open question now is, what are the updated rankings of the media outlets that they have? Also, you know, machine learning fairness is so huge. I don't even know how you would even swallow that. But if you could do, like, you know, ask them, file a subpoena, ask them for documents related to machine learning fairness. And that is going to be such a huge bombshell that it just needs to get into the public disclosure. So it's those three things: machine learning fairness, blacklists, and their media rankings is the start of the entire. What might be a really cheap way to get at this information is to ask what the decision process was for demonetizing Next News Network, right? Like, they're very large, and if you can get that information related to that case, I think that that's going to sort of illuminate what their decision-making processes were for that demonetization. Like, they're still demonetized. They've been demonetized for like 6 months, like the top conservative news network on YouTube. And the question is, why did they get demonetized? And if we have the answer to that, we're going to get the answers to a whole bunch of other like censorship activities with the company.
Voorhees' recommendation for subpoenas targeting Google's internal documents could potentially expose the full extent of their alleged manipulation and bias. Now, the Texas Senate has heeded this call to action. In a unanimous vote, they moved to authorize subpoenas that could finally shed light on the shadowy practices of these tech giants. Now, what you see here is the official motion to authorize these subpoenas, a historic moment for the fight for digital freedom and fair elections. As Thomas Jefferson wisely noted, our liberty depends on the freedom of the press, and that cannot be limited without being lost. Today, that press includes digital platforms, and the threat to our liberty has never been more clear. The battle lines are drawn. On one side, we have a Supreme Court decision that seems to empower government censorship. On the other, we have state legislators and brave whistleblowers fighting to preserve our constitutional rights. As the New Civil Liberties Alliance rightly points out, this Supreme Court decision threatens to erase the First Amendment in the digital age. The fight to restore and protect our rights is only just beginning. If you got value from this report, tap subscribe. My final thought is next. The clash between the Supreme Court's ruling and Texas' bold stand against big tech censorship reveals a deepening divide in our nation's approach to free speech. While the highest court seems to have faltered in its duty, the Lone Star State is rallying to protect our First Amendment rights. This fight is far from over, and it is not just Texas leading the charge. Brave whistleblowers like Zach Voorhees and organizations like TechWatch, they are on the front lines exposing the shadowy practices of big tech and fighting for transparency. Their efforts, combined with state-level investigations, could spark a nationwide movement to safeguard our digital freedoms. As this battle unfolds, we must support these modern-day patriots and remain vigilant. The TechWatch Project's ongoing monitoring of voter manipulation tactics is crucial as we approach the 2024 elections. Remember, as Thomas Paine said, those who expect to reap the blessings of freedom must undergo the fatigue of supporting it. It's up to us to carry that torch and defend our liberties in the digital age.
Congratulations, you made it to the end of the video. Now keep up your quest for truth with this next news report. And if you found our channel enlightening, join the millions who agree with you. Tap subscribe. Thank you for watching the Next News Network.